Hello, my name is Paul Harvey and I am a midlife coach, and you are listening to a life, passion and business shortcast. Now, over the last few years, I have spoken to hundreds of people and I've discovered that our story is everything, because what we do, feel or experience is based on the stories that we tell ourselves. This shortcast is a bite-sized episode to explore the ingredients of a good life. We bring out the thoughts, tips and tools so you can try them on for size. So let's explore and see what is possible. Hello and welcome to a reflection. Inner voices, that one that speaks to you at different times of the day, or when you're doing things, that you possibly shouldn't be doing, or when you are indulging yourself, or all sorts of times. We all have an inner voice. It's funny, I remember it sort of 30 years ago when I first heard about this thing called the inner policeman. And I went to a workshop on that topic about how to befriend your inner policeman. That particular event was dealing with this idea that there is something that says no, that stops us moving forward. And of course, those voices that do this can be influential people in our lives. They can be parents, they can be teachers. But what is this voice? What does it do for us? And why do we have it in the first place? According to Ethan Kross, who is a professor of psychology at the University of Michigan, this voice that we hear is part of a short-term memory system. It's the thing that allows us to chatter to ourselves to remind us that, what do we need to buy today? Oh yeah, it was milk, wasn't it? We have this internal monologue, and that voice is part of that process. It has been documented that people who have strokes, that have lost that inner narrative, they're in complete silence, they lose some of the tools that inner voice gave them, that ability to have a conversation with themselves, that ability to reason out something like in a monologue in their head, the ability to remember to buy milk at the supermarket. But of course, that inner voice can have some power over us and can be something which is positive or destructive. I know my father's situation. He would rerun situations in his head, particularly after my mother died, things that he had done over the years, things that he regretted, and he would rerun those situations as old tapes. And they weren't designed to make him feel good about himself. He did those things out of some kind of guilt, some kind of shame. And that's one of the nasty powers of this voice. It can elicit shame. It can bring up our shame and guilt about circumstances or situations. Shame and guilt is a particularly difficult energy to deal with. I did a podcast a couple of years back with Lois Hollis talking all about beyond shame. And I'm actually going to re-release that this Wednesday, so do look out for that. Getting back to this inner voice, I have met people or I coach people who have remorse over things they've said. Remorse is maybe a strong word. They will have a conversation with someone and see something past that person's face and make a judgment based on it, and then use that judgment to beat themselves up about the conversation they had, the topic they just discussed, their inability to hold a decent conversation. All of these things. Now, a lot of this stuff is self-generated mind chatter based on interpretations or impressions that we are creating around us. But here's the point. We are in control of this voice. It will depend on where our sense of the world is pointing. That will determine how much that voice can affect us. But also, that voice has an immense power that we can use in our favour, that we can use to coach ourselves towards the direction we want to go. This conversation was inspired by Ethan Kross's book called Chatter, The Voice in Our Head, Why It Matters, and How to Harness It. Now, he has done loads and loads of research on this inner voice. And the book goes into great detail explaining how it works and why it's so useful, particularly this idea about how this voice is useful to our daily lives. But he also looks at some of the tools you can use to make the voice work for you. And one of those tools is about distancing. It's about distancing yourself from the voice. Point is, the voice is not out of your control. You are giving it the words. But here's an interesting thing. The use of the word you is critically important in this conversation. From some of my work I did in NLP, one of the experiments that you do in that, when you're using it for yourself, is looking at a circumstance or a situation in your life which was painful or emotionally charged, and seeing that as though it were a movie projected on a screen, and then stepping back from it and making it go further and further and further away. And the more distance you put between yourself and the vision changes the impact that it has. It reduces the emotional charge. So this is this idea that the emotions sit with the image, with the event, and by distancing ourselves from the event, we get to observe it as an observer, which has less power because it's less emotionally charged. And indeed, I've used this myself for my own coaching or my own dealing of difficult circumstances. In Ethan's experiments with this working with the inner voice, he got participants to coach themselves by using their first name and talking to themselves in you. So Paul, you need to look at this in a different way. And that process of the voice stepping away from me as in Paul and talking to me as Paul really changes how I interact with the voice and the power it has over me. Now, this kind of work is not unique to Ethan. It's certainly been in the running industry for a long time. It's certainly been in athletics for a long time and in sports. You see sports psychologists use this concept with people. And I certainly use it when I'm running, when I'm particularly feeling tired, or I'm feeling that I'm struggling with something, or struggling with the distance I'm trying to run. I will say, come on, Paul, you can do this. You can do this now. Just not long to go now. Just hold in there. And it's somehow very, very different. It has a very different feeling when I talk to myself in this way. It absolutely lifts my spirits and helps me get to where I need to get to. Of course, a lot of people have, as in my father's case, in a situation where he was rerunning old tapes around how he did or didn't do the right things around my mother. That kind of negative chatter is the challenge, particularly if you can't go back in time and change something, as my father's situation. And that brings me on to one of my favourite topics, and that's about kindness to ourselves. I always talk about this with coaching clients, about how can you be kind to yourself. And when you have an inner voice that's being unkind, remind it to be kind. Say, that's not the most kindest thing I could say to myself. Have an inner dialogue with it. If your inner voice is being nasty, have a dialogue with it. Ask it why it wants to be nasty to you. Most of the cases, the voice is not trying to be nasty. It's trying to get you to change something or to be somewhere different. And it's ourself. It is a facet of ourself that is trying to get us to the place we want to be. Keep us safe, get us to expand, get us to do something, get us to meet our goals. This is what that voice is about. And we have the choice and the power to control it. And it starts with using your name and just saying, hey, you can do this. Hey, Paul, you can do this. Hey, John, you can do this. The point I'm getting to here today is that your inner voice is actually your friend, and we have to learn to make friends with it and get it on our side. That may involve some inner dialogue. That may involve some journaling. That may involve all sorts of things. It may even have a conversation with a coach. Anyway, I would love to hear how you get on with your inner voice. Do reach out to me if you want to have a conversation about it. If you'd like to know more about the book Chatter, Ethan Kross, you can find it at ethankross.com. And he's been on numerous podcasts and YouTube videos, so you could track him down there. So that's it for me for this week. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please share it with a friend, because that's how people like yourself find good podcasts. Do check out the website Life, Passion and Business to see all the resources that are available to you. And as always, thank you so much for your time and attention. I will catch you next time. All the best.